video tour of the property area. Today we're going to look at some of the significant historical and natural features of the area. Currently we're standing at the front gate looking down the road to the park. As you can see, it's a slight downhill grade which will run for about 1/8 of a mile before we start getting into the park area. We've traveled several hundred yards down the roadway from the gate, and we come to the point where some of the park structures would have been seen. To the right of the road here would have been several large structures, including the theater and the skating rink. The Beaver River is just over the hill in the valley beyond this scene. Looking at the left side of the road, we would have seen part of the roller coaster structure, as well as the turnaround loop for the miniature steam train. From a closer vantage point, we can better see the turnaround area for the miniature train. The return loop for the roller coaster would have also been in this area, but you see the level area right in the center of the picture. That's the right away for the track, and at this point it's actually coming up through the valley directly behind and turning around and heading back into that valley to go back to the starting point. In the same area, here's a look at some of the natural rock features. The tall rock in the background is the same one shown in the picture of the miniature railroad shown on the website. Directly behind that rock would have been the little valley that the train traveled through, and also probably very close to the same level of the rock would have been part of the roller coaster ride. Here's another look at the natural rock area we looked at before from a little further down the road. Along the top of this ridge, the roller coaster would have traveled, and right about in the center of the picture now is the point that the passengers would have loaded and unloaded from the roller coaster. Here's a closer view of the top of the ridge at the point where the roller coaster riders would have loaded and unloaded from the train. As we zoom back, we can see that it's quite a climb up the hillside here. There's a nice pathway that leads up to that area. From the starting point of the roller coaster, the trestle went out and over this area and made a turn to the left and circled back around. As we look back down the road, we would have seen immediately to the left of the road in this area would have been the peristyle building, centered approximately here. Again, to the left of the road, we would have seen the peristyle building right in this area. Then looking a little bit behind the peristyle, we would see the train station for the miniature train, and then directly behind it, in the center of the picture here, would have been the mechanical swings. Of course, as we pan further to the left, we would see again the point that the roller coaster riders would have loaded and unloaded from the train. With the peristyle building sitting to the left of the road in this scene, looking directly across the road, we would have seen the dance hall, one of the larger structures in the park. Obviously there's nothing left of it at this point. Looking again at the peristyle area, just off the road to the left, we can see some of the stones that line the pathways that led up to the peristyle from the main road. In the area near the rear of the peristyle building, you can see a number of pieces of brick fragments and structural materials. This is all that's left of this area. Again, standing near the rear of the peristyle building is the area where the roller coaster would have come off the rock ridge to the left in this picture, and also centered in this picture in the depression in the middle is where the mechanical swings would have been. Surrounding the mechanical swings depression is the right-of-way for the miniature train. If you look closely, you can see some of the leveled out areas and brick or rock work areas that surrounded the train tracks. Looking toward the center of the depression that enclosed the mechanical swings which the miniature train went around, we're looking at it from the opposite vantage point previously seen. As we pan around, we see the ridge top that would have been the starting point for the roller coaster. And a little further down, we see the small valley that the train would have traveled through. It made a loop around us where I'm standing now and connected to itself and went through this small valley back to the turnaround loop that we looked at earlier in the video. In this scene, we're standing at a high point in the park where the cistern's located. Right now we're looking back at the area that the peristyle would have been situated. Looking down at the roadway, the dance hall would have been right across the road from here. Following the roadway down, we're looking at the area now where the woman's cottage restroom would have been. A little further as we go up the hill is where the Rock Point Inn would have been situated. Now we can take a look down into the cistern area. This was the big water storage area that provided all the drinking water for the park. Back down the hill from the cistern area, we're standing on the roadway looking towards the Rock Point. As we pan to the left, we see the area where the woman's cottage would have been. In fact, this view here is very similar to the postcard view with the woman's cottage and the wooden footbridge crossing over the road here. As we look up the hill, right in this area is where the Rock Point Inn would have stood. You would have probably just seen the rooftop of it from here. It was slightly over that ridge there. Centered right here in the middle of the picture is the high point where the cistern is located. We've traveled just off the road to the right, looking again at the woman's cottage area, which would have been right around the center of this picture. If you look at the ground just below here, you'll see a number of rounded rocks. This was that pyramid structure that you see in the postcard of the woman's cottage. I think it had a metal ornament or a flag or something on top of that. Further down the trail towards the Rock Point, just to the right of the woman's cottage, is this remains of one of the drinking fountains. As you can see, there are only pieces left of it. Here appears to be a base toward the bottom and maybe a top cap or a roof towards the top of the picture. Then looking back at the water fountain itself with about a 24-inch bowl, and assuming this piece was maybe a side piece or a base to the structure. We're now standing on the rock bluff overlooking the Connoquenessing Creek at the point where the Shoot the Chutes ride would have started its journey down the ramp into the lagoon below. We'll take a closer look at the lagoon in a little while as I make my way down the hillside. We're looking at the famous Rock Point, the area where the strip of high terrace land where most of the park was situated narrows down into a point and falls into the valleys to the left and to the right. To the left would be the Connoquenessing Creek, and to the right, looking down the hill to the Beaver River. Here's a closer view of the Rock Point looking down at the Connoquenessing Creek. Straight ahead you can see the top of the old train bridge crossing the creek, and of course to the right the Beaver River down below. With the Rock Point to my back, we're looking at the trail that led down to the main unloading area for the Pennsylvania Railroad train passengers. This trail was a gentle walk down the hillside to the point where the passengers would load and unload from the train below. As we head down the trail to the train station, you can see that it is still passable, but it is in pretty bad shape. So if you do plan on making this trip, be very careful on this trail. Certain parts of it are fairly washed out and a little bit difficult to navigate. About 2/3 of the way down from the top of the trail, this is the scene that one of the postcards depicts, where the passengers are unloading from the train and beginning to walk up the trail. Of course the train tracks to the left, and in this scene the trail immediately to the right. Here we are near the bottom of the trail looking up. This is very similar to one of the postcard scenes where passengers are getting off the train and walking up the trail towards the park. Here you can see the train tracks, and of course just beyond the tracks is the Beaver River. Looking down the train tracks toward the Iron Bridge, we can see the area just in the top center of the picture, just to the left of the bridge where the Matheny Inn would have been situated. Here's a closer look at the same area with the railroad bridge and the Matheny Inn being situated in the center of the picture. There are no longer any remains other than a few foundation stones that are a little difficult to pick out unless you know what you're looking for. Here's a look at some of the foundation stones of the old Matheny Inn. As we zoom back and look upward, you can see the point of Rock Point Park situated just above the location of the inn. Here we are at the point where the Beaver River and the Connoquenessing Creek come together. You can see the old iron train bridge crossing the Connoquenessing Creek. And as we look up the creek, we'll see the area where the Rock Point Boat Club now resides. And panning further to the left is Rock Point. If we continue to the left, look at the Beaver River side of Rock Point, and this is the area from the other side where the Matheny Inn was located. Here's another view looking up the Connoquenessing Creek towards the Rock Point Boat Club. This is a nice straight-on shot of the Rock Point natural feature as we pan up to the top of the point. This is what visitors would have seen as they first approached the park, and as the train was slowing down to begin unloading for those folks to enjoy the park for the day. There's also a trail. It's difficult to see because there's not much left of it, but going up the front face of Rock Point Bluff up to the park this way also. So there were two ways for passengers to climb up to the park. Another nice view of the Rock Point. This view is similar to the postcard shot of the wishing well and the boat rental house. The boat rental would have been centered in this picture, and the wishing well is located in this area that's now covered by a wooden structure because apparently there is a fairly deep well beneath. Here's a nice view of the Connoquenessing Creek looking towards the Beaver River. We were lucky enough to have a train crossing at the time. Here's a view of the lagoon area for the Shoot the Chutes ride. As you can see, the Rock Point Boat Club clubhouse is situated at the lower end of the lagoon area. And as we follow the concrete walls toward the splashdown point, we can see to the left the area where the boats would come for the passengers to load and unload. And then if we go up the hill, we can see the point where the ride would have originated, and the riders came down a 300-foot wooden ramp in their little wooden boats and splashed into the pond below at this point. Must have been exciting. Here's a closer look at the area where the passengers would have come or been pulled in their splashdown boats into this channel area, where they would have been guided up to a little flat area dock arrangement where they can unload from the boats. Then the boats were pulled around and lifted back up to the top. As riders traveled through the channel to the unloading point, they would have gotten off the boat somewhere in this area. Then the boats were pulled along through the channel and directed into this channel for their return trip back up to the top of the hill. Here we are at the splashdown point of the Shoot the Chutes ride. Certainly nothing left of it at this point, but if you can imagine, the ramp would have gone straight up the hill from here to that top point of the ridge. Here we are a little bit up the hill from the lagoon area. This is the view the passengers would have seen just before they splashed down into the large pool. From the lagoon area, we look up the hill going upstream from the Connoquenessing to the area where the merry-go-round was situated and the ball field right on top of this hill. Also, there were picnic areas up there, as well as picnic areas right here on the level part above the lagoon. As we prepare to end our video tour for the day, I wanted to give you one last shot from a point fairly central to the main park area. We're at the top of the hill near the woman's cottage, looking at the area across the road where the peristyle would be situated. This scene is very similar to one of the postcard views that's often seen. As we pan to the right, we see the area where the mechanical swings, roller coaster, and miniature train would have been. And a little further up on the rise in the center of the frame is the cistern, and directly next is the area for the Rock Point Park Inn. We travel back to the road that leads down to the Connoquenessing Creek, where the wooden footbridge would have crossed over between those two ridges at this point. Then to where the woman's cottage restroom area was situated. And looking further down towards Rock Point, in the center of the frame now is where the top of the Shoot the Chutes ride would have been. And the Rock Point area is roughly in the center of the picture now. In the wide open terrace area immediately in front of us would have been more or less the midway, where the concessions, souvenir stands, small game buildings would have stood. It's my understanding that there were probably a dozen or more small buildings in this area. And as we begin to look up the road again, just centered in this frame is where we would have seen the large dance hall that you see pictured in the postcards. And again, back to the area where the peristyle building was situated. We thank you for visiting with us today. If you have any comments or questions about this video, please feel free to email me. My address is at the bottom of the video image here. And look forward to your comments and suggestions. And as always, thank you for visiting rockpointpark.com.